What's going on, my freedom-loving patriots? Thanks for coming to the Curious Mind in Politics and Life. This is Jordan. Hope you guys are having a blessed day. Please like, comment, hit that subscribe button below. I want to get something straight before we get the debate going, the debate of the century, it seems. You are not going to tell me how to run my channel. I've had people comment in the comment section saying don't react, don't talk, blah, 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 blah. You are watching a reactor's YouTube channel, so you're not going to tell me how to run it. I'm going to run it how I want. I'm going to pause it as much as I want, and I'm going to talk as much as I want. If you don't want to listen to what I have to say, you can go find the video yourselves. Until then, I'm going to keep bringing you guys good content, reacting to good content. Anyways, today we have Nick Fuentes and Dinesh D'Souza, I believe his name, debate. Alex Jones, the one and only. I love Alex Jones. He's exposed so much in our history and been right on everything, but he's going to be the one moderating this debate. Enough talking. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if there's anything you want me to do in the future. Let's get it.
For almost 30, 45 minutes, I'm going to try to shut up and have a real debate. There's nothing more frustrating than these debates where there's constant interruption. So, Dinesh, thanks for accepting this debate. I'm glad it happened, glad it got done. Thank you so much. You've got the floor for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you, Alex. Welcome, Nick. I am looking forward to our debate, and it's I'm thrilled to do it because free speech has been under attack, and you guys, Alex, Nick, Laura Loomer, and others have been deplatformed. I am a strong opponent of all of this. And for this reason, even though some people were like, why do you want to debate Nick Fuentes? I'm like, no, there are taboo issues here that are being raised. They're not being adequately discussed. Some people run away from them. I don't run away from them. And I think it's a good idea to sort of have it out. And so that's really why I'm here. I want to defend Trump. I want to defend MAGA. Make America Great Again. I want to defend America First. Seems to me we have a big disagreement here about what America First means. And that's what I want to talk about. When we talk about making America great again, it's important to think about what made America great in the first place. Now, one obvious answer to that is that America became great by kind of looking inward and attending to its own problems. Going back to the founders, but that is not only not entirely true, it's not true at all. Right after the American founding, Thomas Jefferson found out that there were these Barbary pirates in the Middle East. Now, they weren't attacking America, they weren't starting a war over here, but Jefferson basically dispatched an armed force to clobber them, to beat the heck out of them. Why? Because they were disrupting our interests, they were disrupting our trade, they were hurting our position in the world. So even though we had this infant democracy, clobbering bad guys is something that we started doing from the very beginning. Now, fast forward to, Alex, you and I are in Texas, and let's talk about the middle of the 19th century. Again, America's building a strong country.
I get asked all the time about how my mom recovered her memory. She just turned 82. Almost no one knows this.
Focused inward, but guess what? We get into a big war with Mexico. The Mexican War lasts about 4 years. We started the Mexican War. We go over there, get our troops into Mexico City, clobber the Mexicans, take a good chunk of Mexico, including a good chunk of Texas. Later, large parts of the country that were not part of America become added to the country. And we do this basically by force. Now, we have good reasons for it. I'm not going to go into the reasons, but the point is we did it. Fast forward now, I'm going to omit World War II and focus on Reagan. The Soviet Empire is gaining strength. The Soviet Union grabs 9 countries, 10 countries actually, between 1974 and 1980. They don't attack us. They're not waging war over here. And Reagan does not start a war with them either. But what he does do is he starts clobbering them in all kinds of ways. He clobbers them in Afghanistan, he clobbers them in Somalia, in Angola, in Mozambique, in Nicaragua. And we do it by supporting armed forces that are repelling these Soviet armies, and we win the Cold War. Who can deny that the world is better off and America's better off? That is America first. And that is making America great again. So when we're talking about making America great again, it has never meant, and it doesn't mean for Trump, a kind of, isolationism. I would even deny that it means no new wars. And I say that because no president who takes an oath to support the Constitution can make that absolute guarantee. There are all kinds of scenarios, and I'm happy to lay out about 6 of them, in which the United States would be drawn into a war. And so the pledge is made as a statement of principle, but Trump is the commander in chief, and it's his decision to make at a given time when the situation is dangerous enough that there should be a war. Now, there isn't a war going on in Iran, but I do want to say about the Iranians this. They are not a regional power like Iraq. This is, I think, one of the key differences. A lot of people think Iran is Iraq, and Saddam Hussein is the same as the mullahs, and Trump is the same as Bush. He's becoming like Bush. No, Iran has a global ideology, and they always have. The reason that they chant death to America, they also chant death to Israel, but death to America is the main chant, and death to Israel is the secondary chant. Why? Because we are the main enemy. We are the great Satan. Israel may be the little Satan, but we are the great Satan. And we are controlling Israel, not the other way around. At least that's how the Iranians see it. The little Satan is not telling the great Satan what to do. It's actually the opposite.
I don't know about that.
The Iranian goal is a global caliphate that obviously involves global supervision, Sharia law, bringing it here, infiltrating this country, terror cells. And the nuclear weapons are just taking this global ideology and giving it enormous power. There's an old saying that says, what do you call a dictator who has nuclear weapons? And the answer is, sir. What that means is that when a guy gets nukes, he's on a completely different level. You've got to, in a sense, be deferential in a way that you otherwise wouldn't. So here's Iran. They are cooking these nukes. They are building this uranium. They're enriching it way beyond any peaceful purposes. And Trump says, look, it's in our interest that they not have this weapon. Yes, it's in Israel's interest as well, but we're not doing it for Israel. We're doing it because we don't want them to have a nuclear weapon.
Okay, Dinesh, that's about 5 minutes.
What do you guys think about Dinesh's opening statement? I agree and disagree with some of his points. Let me know what you guys think.
We'll come back to you. You guys have a free-for-all in a moment. Nick Fuentes, and something you said, Dinesh, I'm just going to add a small caveat and then go back to you guys. So I meant to say it up front. I appreciate you doing this debate. I appreciate Nick and you guys having this idea. I forget who came up with it, but I think if I remember correctly, Nick challenged you and you said sure, and then here we are 2 weeks later. So thank you both for doing this. But exactly what we're doing is what the left, who is diabolical against free speech, does not want. They don't want real debates, and so this is very, very healthy and very, very pro-freedom, pro-America. And I appreciate you both for being here. Just wanted to add that. So thanks for reminding me, Dinesh D'Souza. All right, Nick Fuentes, you've got about 5.5, 6 minutes because Dinesh went a little bit over because I didn't stop him. So Nick Fuentes of America First.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to start out by saying as well, I appreciate Dinesh D'Souza for doing the debate. And I actually appreciate him saying that because it is true. We have both been brutally censored. And I know that Dinesh was also targeted by the Obama administration. So, we're really all sort of in the same boat in terms of we've all been persecuted to some extent. So I appreciate him saying that. But I'd like to move on and get into the subject of the debate. And I actually like how Dinesh framed it. I agree with him. The central question concerning the Iran war is, what does America first mean? What is the United States' involvement in Iran, or what should it be? And how does that conform to the stated goal of putting our country first, making America great again, and pursuing the American strategic interest? And without going into the Barbary Wars or Reagan or any of that, we don't need to go back that far. I think we need to talk about the current strategic landscape in the Middle East. And we need to get some things down first analytically before we proceed. And I'm actually going to pick up where Dinesh left off at the end and kind of start with that premise, because that is, I think, the mainstream premise. Let's say that's a status quo accepted premise of the U.S. Media or the conservative media, is that Iran is an apocalyptic regime. They have global ambitions. They're led by religious zealots and fanatics. They're racing towards a bomb because they want to attack Israel and the United States. And I would say that with that analytical framework, you probably would say that it's justified that we go to war with Iran. I would probably agree under those circumstances. But I will clarify a couple of things. Let's say that in the first place, this is not the first regime that has been described this way. When we were at war with the Soviet Union, it was conservative military planners that said the exact same thing. They said the Soviets are a nihilistic death cult. We can't negotiate with them. Khrushchev said, we will bury them. They want to destroy the United States. Of course, we negotiated with them. Of course, Nixon had détente, and eventually we negotiated with Gorbachev, and the wall came down, and we didn't have to go to war. We said the same thing about Maoist China. They killed 70 million people. They're a communist death cult. We negotiate with them all the time. They joined the World Trade Organization. I don't think anybody would argue that communism is not a nihilistic global ideology with ambitions to take over the planet. It certainly did. It always had. Yet we negotiated. Let's also talk about Iran's nuclear program. And once again, let's sort of do some housekeeping. Iran does not have a nuclear bomb. They're not currently pursuing a nuclear bomb. And what you would call Iran is a nuclear threshold state. They're engaging in something, and this is technical, it's called nuclear hedging. This is where you have the technology, the expertise, and the infrastructure to make a nuclear weapon, but you don't actually build one. Why do you maintain the threshold latent nuclear status? You maintain that in the event that the security situation changes. There's a few countries, actually, not just Iran, they're in the exact same boat. And those countries are South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. They're all considered nuclear threshold states. They have the expertise, the infrastructure, the technology to make a bomb. Why do they have that expertise? Why do they maintain the threshold status? Because they're on the doorstep of China. China is a much more powerful country, and they themselves have a native nuclear program. They engage in nuclear hedging in the event that they need to deter a threat from a regional adversary.
Yeah. Oh, but I guess. One sec, guys. Sorry, the laptop died. Let me switch back over.
Why is Iran pursuing nuclear hedging? Why do they have a threshold status? They have this because Israel is the only country in the Middle East, actually, that has an undeclared nuclear weapons program. They have a nuclear arsenal of 200 bombs. They're not a signatory on the NPT. Israel's the only country with a nuclear arsenal, and they're Iran's sworn enemy. Let's also talk about the history. The United States overthrew the government of Iran in 1953, a democratically elected prime minister who wanted to nationalize Iran's resources and put Iran first. He was overthrown by the CIA. The United States installed a brutal dictatorship. The Iranian people revolted against it. Ever since, the United States and Israel have been at war with Iran, and we've destroyed all their neighbors. We went into Iraq and overthrew Saddam Hussein.
All right, Nick, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just said 5 minutes. It could have been 10 minutes. You guys are both smart to talk for hours. So at this point, just let Dinesh come back and counter that. And then you guys this is a real debate. You guys can have a free for all. So I'll just pitch it back to this Dinesh. You can leave off where you were.
Let this soft mineral melt in your mouth to rebuild your gums and teeth and never need a dentist again. Did you know there?
Stopping there, Nick Fuentes, go ahead.
Yeah, terrific. I mean, Alex, I think you only jump in if we are interrupting too much and can make our points, or either hogging all the time. And I think otherwise, I'm happy to just go back and forth. I'd like to just address a few of these points, and we can kind of get into it further. So I'll start by kind of correcting a couple of points that I think are just fallacious. The first one is the idea that the Soviet Union was said to be some kind of a maniacal, nihilistic power. No one ever said that. Not only that, but the whole premise of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, was based upon the idea that you have two completely rational adversaries, and each of them understand that the deployment of nuclear weapons, the one against the other, will meet with catastrophic retaliation. Never once did we dream that Khrushchev was like a suicide bomber, or Brezhnev or Andropov or Chernenko or any of the Soviet leaders going back to Lenin. We knew that they valued their lives. We saw them as protecting their own interests. So the idea that there's some kind of we've heard all this before with Russia and China, that's not true. The idea of negotiating with the Soviet Union was the liberal idea. It was the idea that when you make treaties, people behave themselves. And I think Reagan exposed that to be fundamentally stupid. It misses what human nature is all about. It misses the lessons of Machiavelli and Clausewitz and Sun Tzu. It misses the idea that treaties are simply disguised ways that powerful countries advance their own interests. No one is going to sit down and make a treaty because they want to. You make treaties because you have to. You make treaties, by and large, in which you concede things that you would have lost anyway on the battlefield. Now, let's look at Iran, for example. If it's true, first of all, a word about Mossadegh. I heard Nick use the word democratically elected. Mossadegh was not democratically elected. He was not elected by the Iranian people. He was, in fact, appointed by the Shah. Let's remember that the Shah was in power in 1953. So if you have a dictator who's running the country, how does someone get democratically elected? So I think this is actually taking up a talking point from the left, and a bogus talking point also. By the way, the first thing that Mossadegh did when he came in, he dissolved parliament. So this democratically elected guy dissolves the very parliament that supposedly put him into power. So he was an autocrat, in some ways no different than the Shah. There was a power struggle. Yes, the CIA was involved. Mossadegh was overthrown. In my view, that was a very good thing. Now, some people will say, well, that's what caused the Iranian Revolution. Wrong. The Mossadegh business was in 1953. The Iranian Revolution was in 1979. Are you telling me that the Iranians were really mad, but they decided to go on a 25-year vacation and then decided, okay, now let's work ourselves up into a frenzy 25 years later? The reason we got Iran is basically because of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter decided that the Shah was a despot. He didn't want to support the secret police. He pulled the Persian rug out from the Shah, and basically we got Khomeini. So this is the nincompoopery of Jimmy Carter. He tried to get rid of what he saw as the bad guy, and we got the worst guy.
Okay,
And
so
since
Nick,
then, we've had a regime.
respond to that, but we're going to jump in a bunch. This is a great debate, but we're kind of doing a history lesson, debating history. Go as long as you guys want. We go 3 hours if you want. I hope we get into the current stuff, the Fatwa, Trump saying they may have a peace deal Monday.
What the fuck is going on?
The Israel lobby, all of that. But I'm going to stop there. Nick, come back. You guys start going back and forth there.
Sure, I would come back and, I don't want to turn it into a big history thing about the Soviet Union and communism, but I would say that's simply not true. I mean, it was credible. And this is what the Pentagon believed in the late 60s and early 70s, is that the Soviets thought that they could survive a first strike against the United States. The idea that mutually assured destruction was just revolution and diplomacy because of nukes. It's just belied by doctrine. And during the 60s and 70s, we believed the Soviets were more powerful than us. They had more nukes than us. And we thought that they were going to strike us first. They thought they could survive it. And the rhetoric about the Soviets was the same. They have this global And the second place of Mossadegh is really neither here nor there, the exact particularities here. The point is this: the United States and Israel pursue regime change across the entire region. That's the point I'm trying to make, and I didn't get to finish in my opening statement. We overthrew Iran's government once, and you admit it's a CIA coup in 1953. In 1979, the people are furious because of the secret police, because of the white revolution, because of the reforms that were made under the Shah. They overthrow the Shah's government, the Western-backed government, because they saw it as a puppet. And the Islamic Revolution enjoyed broad support in Iranian society. What took place ever since then is regime change. One regime change operation after another. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Egypt, Syria, you name it, whether it's the Arab Spring and it's these soft power, color revolution coups, or the ground wars, or it's civil wars. That's the business we do. And we do it no matter who it is. We do it against secular dictators. We do it against people that operate with us and those that don't. Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons in 2003. We backed airstrikes against him anyway in 2011. We backed Saddam at one point. We oversaw the dismantlement of his nuclear program. We went to war against him in 2003. We said we weren't going to war against Assad in Syria. We did. He's now overthrown, and now you have ISIS in power. This is the history of the Middle East. And this gets to the reason of why Iran wants a nuclear weapon. It's not because they want to kill everybody. It's not because they're fanatical and we can't negotiate and they're trying to bring about the end times and the eschaton. It's because they want to deter the same fate, regime change would happen to all of their neighbors. That makes them rational.
Oh, let me stop you. I said I won't interrupt you. You guys are both too polite. Every 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to make you pause. That goes back to what Dinesh was just saying earlier. He's like, when North Korea has nukes, we say, sir, which I get that, and I don't want them having nukes. They do, and ballistic missiles hit us. But that then begs the question: Iran, if we can hedge and maybe have some hidden, then that speaks to why they would want a nuke. I mean, there's a lot to say here, but go ahead.
Yeah, one of the mullahs, right in the middle of all this, one of the key mullahs made a very key admission. He said, "This is not about Iran. This is about Islam. Right there, you get the heart of the matter. These mullahs, and yes, there was a broad-based Iranian revolution, but the mullahs in that power struggle took power. And they have ruled dictatorially over Iran now since 1979. They've made the Iranian revolution semi-permanent. But the key to understanding that revolution, going all the way back from when they seized the American hostages to the strike on Beirut, 1982, to the fact that Iran has been sponsoring terrorism, not just in the region. They have tentacles in Venezuela. They have tentacles in South America. They have cells in the United States. They are making an alliance with Russia and China to create a kind of axis of power. So to the degree, Nick, that you're saying that this is, a global chessboard, I agree. And I think that, in a way, puts an interesting question for us, which is that isn't it a fact that there is a jihadi or radical strain of Islam? This ultimately is what is driving a lot of these radical Muslims, right? They are Hezbollah, Hamas. It doesn't matter whether they're Shia or Sunni. Hamas is Sunni. Why is Iran funding Hamas? Because they don't care about those distinctions at the end of the day. At the end of the day, they care about whether you're an infidel, yes or no. This radical Islam is a global ideology. Look, you can say the mullahs keep saying it. I don't believe it, but you should believe it. When the Russians said that they wanted a global triumph of communism, they meant it. We took it seriously. And by the way, we didn't end the Soviet Union through some sort of a...
They spend billions to fund foreign wars, and yet you're still drowning in debt. Until now. The 2025 Economic Debt Relief Program just went live.
The new
treaty. We ended the Soviet Union by bankrupting them. Reagan ultimately defeated them in the Cold War. It was not a treaty. It was...
Anyone that's been here, I'm so sorry about the shitty connection. I figured out the issue. Now it's back to working. It will not continue to happen. Let's continue the debate.
They were out of gas. They couldn't compete in an arms race. We were building MX missiles and putting multiple warheads on them. We were building a missile shield. We were supporting guerrilla revolutions around the world. That's ultimately, Afghanistan became, by their own admission, a bleeding wound. So this is why the Soviets gave in. They didn't give in. No country ever gives in because of a treaty. The idea that communism abolished itself, Eastern Europe was freed because we put a piece of paper in front of them and went, oh, okay, let's get rid of all of this stuff. We were once a global empire, will now become a second-rate superpower. That's not how it happened at all. And that's a misunderstanding of Iran. Islam is a conquering force. The Muslims came out of the Arabian desert. How do you think they conquered the Holy Land? They took Jerusalem. They took Syria. They took Jordan. They conquered Iran by force. That's how they got it. They are the occupier of Iran.
Okay, Dinesh, and by the way, you're both very smart men. I've studied the history. You're both, accurate in the basic facts. Very interesting. A lot. I'm not saying the general public's dumb, but even really smart political people, most of them can't find around on a map. So I don't want to throw this in. I figured, very smart, Dinesh, trying to throw the debate away here, but very smart to get into America versus Iran up front. I was imagining, and I'm not trying to steer this, though I want to spend some time on it, the whole issue of Israel and the Israel lobby and where that sits, because I know that's Nick's bailiwick. And, so that's just something I'm throwing out there as well, because that's why a lot of Americans...
We shouldn't be giving anything to Israel. We should let them fend for themselves. We should let every country fend for themselves. I'm totally against that. What do you think about that, Jonathan? It seems like, and up until a couple months ago, if you would have told me that Israel controls our policies and our politicians, I would have said you're crazy. But it seems like that is exactly what the case is. You're not anti-Semitic for it. It's the facts.
Have seen, I'm not saying I love the Islamists or any of this, but we've seen regime change. Now, the former head of Al-Qaeda in charge of Syria, we see, Hamas being, Israel helped set it up, as a counterbalance. Then we've got, Iran, all of this. And so I think a lot of Americans just don't believe the intelligence establishment, even though I wouldn't cry at night if the mullahs fell. So, what about the AIPAC Israel issue in all of this, Dinesh, for like a minute?
Well, can I respond actually to what he said?
Sorry, I apologize. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I just want to have equal time. But I mean, with regard to this, there is just like this, and forgive me if this sounds, I'm trying to be cordial here, but I do believe there is this engine in the United States from the conservative movement that says it is about Islam. This is Glenn Beck's book. This is sort of the Fox News mantra. It is Islam. Islam is the problem. And and I'm not an Islamist. I'm a Catholic. I'm not pro-Islam, and I wouldn't even call myself pro-Iran. I'm pro-America. And to sort of narrow the discussion, let's talk about Islamism. Let's talk about jihadism. I agree with you. There is an element of jihadism in the Middle East. There are these radical Muslims that they want to return to the faith of the pious ones, the ancient Muslims, the first 2 or 3 generations of Muslims. They come from Saudi Arabia. Hezbollah, Hamas.
Yes, Jonathan, that's exactly it. We are pro-America. It doesn't make sense. We should be putting America first. Exactly. Not Israel first, not Iran first, not Russia, not Ukraine first. America first. We need to put all our essentials and all of our belongings and keep it in America, because people are sick of seeing, I'm sorry to say it, Israel is starting to push us into war with these other countries. That's just what I'm seeing. But they support, it just doesn't make sense. If you go into all the wars and what we supported, you will see it seems like Israel in some ways behind all of them. And that doesn't make me anti-Semitic. It makes it true if you look into it behind what you're being told.
The Iranian-backed groups do not attack Americans on American soil. They're not global powers. They're local powers. They're regional powers. They don't attack the United States. They may attack the United States in Beirut or Iraq because the United States is in their territory. We're in the Middle East. We're in their neighborhood. We're backing Israel's brutal war on Lebanon in the 80s, where they commit massacres, castrating people, scalping people, brutal atrocities that are well documented that Israel, their own commission blames Ariel Sharon for this, the defense minister. So, they don't attack us on our soil. The terrorists that do attack us are Wahhabist. They're Salafist. That comes from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia spent billions of dollars promoting Wahhabism, which is the ideology of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS. We backed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. We backed bin Laden. We do arms deals with Saudi Arabia. And you know what? To some extent, this radicalism is going away. And it came from Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, these other places. And it's going away because we made a deal with Mohammed bin Salman. We did arms deals throughout. We're allies throughout, buy oil from them throughout. We didn't invade Saudi Arabia and install a Western liberal democracy. We don't like your regime. We're going to drop bombs on you. We negotiated with them over time. And by the way, they were the biggest problem. As far as Iran is concerned, it's important to analytically determine their strategic interest, because that's how you determine what we have to do about it. Israel wants regime change in Iran. That's why Iran wants a bomb to deter this, which is a credible fear. Now, the United States won't let Iran have the bomb. Now, if you want to give Iran the Soviet Union treatment and bankrupt them through maximum pressure and sanctions, that's what we were doing. But you're calling for regime change. We didn't do regime change in the Soviet Union. We allowed them, and we went in there, actually. George Bush managed it, I think, in a good way. We managed a peaceful transition of power after a long period of soft power and smart power that we used against them. You're saying we need to go in and invade Iran, or not maybe invade Iran, but force them to have regime change with CIA operations, foreign media, maximum pressure sanctions, backing Israeli operations.
Literally what we did in Ukraine, people. That's what they want to do in Russia. They did it in Ukraine, and that's why they took out Osama bin Laden. They used him as the fall guy for 9/11, while our own CIA propped up these people to make it seem like 9/11 was a big terrorist plot, when it was really our own government that did that. Look into it. I'm telling you, I'm right. And Israel was behind it.
And I would say that's not in America's interest. That's what Israel wants. That's not what we want. Regime change has a terrible track record from Libya, Egypt, Iraq, Syria. There's 0 success stories. I think that I agree with you in some sense. We don't want a nuclear Iran, but we need to understand why we're on the threshold of one. And that has to do with Israel's ambitious and aggressive actions. In my opinion, the move is restrain Israel, stop them from attacking Iran, get Iran to come back to the table, and try to get them to agree to some kind of framework like the JCPOA. And maybe we could talk about the JCPOA, because to me, that is the most important precedent to all of this.
I am trying to equal time. I was throwing a quick question back to Dinesh to give you a longer response, because I'm glad we're having this debate. I just figured it would be about the current situation. I love the history, but we're kind of still in that. And I'm glad you guys are so informed and trying to educate people. But just in general, you guys go wherever you want, counter back what he was saying, Dinesh. But then I would like to just interject. The current crisis, where do you see it going? The Fatwa, Trump saying, I'm going to kill, you're lucky I don't kill you. I might kill you, the Iranian leader, which I support Trump and love him. But, that was provocative. I mean, and also ask you guys where you think this is going, and is there a path for peace?
Israel has been saying since the early 90s that they have a nuclear weapon. He is literally on video, Israel's prime minister, saying that since the early 90s. That alone should make you question if he's telling the truth or not.
To the larger debate which I figured you guys would get into first about the Israel lobby.
All right, let me say some things about regime change to lay a foundation of what I think the MAGA view on this is. Because I think the MAGA view on this is a repudiation of Bush, but it's not a repudiation of Reagan. In fact, it's a restatement of the Reagan principles, although admittedly in a very different situation. Obviously, in the 70s and 80s, the Reagan focus was on the Soviet Empire. The situation now is totally different. But there are a lot of really bad regimes in the world. And these are regimes that harm our interests in all kinds of ways. So ask a simple question. Is it in our interest for these really bad regimes, and I'll be happy to go through a list and we can agree on what they are, would it be a good idea for these regimes to have change? For the bad guys who are running these regimes to go, get away, for the regimes themselves to be toppled, and for something else to take their place. So if we look at Iran, for example, I would say, I am willing to take any chance on getting rid of the mullahs, these jihadi mullahs, these people who wish death to us and are building up the means to do it. Oh, and I don't.
Yet we have China, who is literally impacting and buying every politician with nuclear war, if I recall, and we're just letting them sit there while they're literally coming in and buying off all of our politicians. So why is it always just with Iran, yet China is literally demolishing our country without even a single shot? It's the same. It's always the same talking points.
Oh, no. Okay, maybe
Neocons.
Nick's right. Maybe he's wrong. I tend to believe the mullahs over Nick. They say that they want to have global jihad. They say that they want a global caliphate. They say that they're building up the strength to do it. They're allying with other people who certainly do have nuclear weapons and do have that kind of power. So would it be a good idea to have regime change in Iran? Would it be in our interest? Forget about Israel. Of course it would. Now, a separate question is, what are we willing to expend for that to happen? So my question to Nick is, all right, let's start at the very beginning. Would you be willing to expend 50 cents to get the mullahs to leave, to quit, to go home, to become refugees and go to other countries? They can go to luxury apartments in Qatar and elsewhere, and let the Iranian people have a plebiscite. We're not going to go in there. We're not going to arrange tribal meetings. We're not going to take over the country. We're going to let them fix it. I would be very confident that what comes after, whatever it is, it could be autocracy, it could be democracy, it could be some hybrid, is going to be better than what's there now. So I think Nick is so blinded by his hatred of Israel that he's losing sight of America first. He's become automatically friendly to the mullah, so he's giving them.
That's what they always go to, folks. If you are against bombing other countries and installing a puppet government, which I did in Ukraine, just look it up, then you are hateful towards Israel. This is always their go-to point. It doesn't make sense at this point. The public isn't buying it anymore.
A much more rational account of the Iranian interest than he even gives of American interest. I mean, every time he talks about America, he uses the phrase we. But let's remember that we've had alternating regimes between.
For Patriots is upgrading one of their best-selling offers with the new Patriot Power Gen.
Republicans and Democrats. So he mentioned the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring was basically an anti-American operation organized with the help of Barack Obama. Barack Obama wants Iran to have nukes. He was trying to create space for them to do that and give them money to enable them to do that. Why? Because Obama has an ideology that's anti-American. So we can't just say we and take the blame for what Obama did and what
okay,
other
Dinesh,
people
I'm
did.
just watching the clock, trying to just be a referee here. Good points. Nick?
Well, that's a lot to tackle there. I would say in the first place, and I have to address this first just to get it out of the way. When you say we take the mullahs at their word, you're citing one of their clerical leaders, and you say, well, that guy said it's about Islam. That defines their whole regime. If you want to take them at their word, let's go to the supreme leader. The supreme leader is the top cleric in Iran, the top cleric in Shiite Islam. It's in their constitution. Supreme leader's got to be a cleric. The Ayatollah promulgated a fatwa 20 years ago that says that attaining nuclear weapons and using them is against Islamic law. And that has been cited over and over again in 2005, in 2015. In recent negotiations, they say the supreme leader says It's contrary, and I could give you the quotes, completely to Islamic doctrine to have nuclear weapons. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say we're going to take them at their word when one guy in the government says we're going to take over the world, but you can't have it both ways and say we can't listen to the supreme leaders say we don't want nuclear weapons. We have to do one or the other. I'll just say that first. Then we get further and we get into this question.
Nick, may I ask you a question about that?
Well,
just
can
because
I
think
okay,
times,
sure. Yeah,
okay,
we'll
go
get
ahead.
this
I know
out of
you,
the
go
way.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, so, and then with regard to regime change, I would contend that regime change is just not desirable. You say, well, how much are you willing to expend to pursue regime change? I'm saying I don't think it's desirable. And here's the evidence for this. You say, well, I'm confident something better will happen. There'll be this democratic plebiscite. What is the history of regime change? When Hosni Mubarak was overthrown in Egypt, you got the Muslim Brotherhood, Islamism, Mohammed Morsi. When Gaddafi was overthrown, you get warlords, you get civil war. When Syria was overthrown, you get ISIS. You get this guy al-Julani, who's literally from ISIS and al-Qaeda. In Afghanistan, you still have the Taliban. If we overthrow Iran, and by the way, here's the other evidence. When Israel attacked Iran 2 weeks ago, they thought that the government would collapse and the people would rise up and they would overthrow the government. This is what they said for years. The opposite happened. The people rallied to the supreme leader. They said, we're under attack from a foreign entity. They actually rallied in the streets, and there were major funeral processions for the martyrs, the IRGC leaders that were killed. They rallied behind the government. If anything, if this government goes down, I don't know where you think we're going to get something better. We're going to get something more hardcore. The reason why it matters to articulate Iran's interests is to say, if their worst fear is regime change, which is the credible fear of all leaders, every leader wants to stay in power. No leader wants to meet the fate of Gaddafi. No leader wants to be deposed and live in exile. If their credible fear is regime change, and we pursue that in one form or another, and it's a little naive to say they're going to come together and have a new government. CIA and State Department and Israel will be all over that, just like they have in all these other operations. You're going to get hardliners. You're going to get IRGC commanders that said, our worst nightmare happened. Now we're really in a apocalyptic war. Now we're really, this is the end times. The United States overthrew us.
Okay,
so I'm
you want
against
to answer,
regime change.
I'm going to watch the clock here. Do you want to answer Dinesh's question or just go back to Dinesh?
Was that what question?
I forget the exact question. Dinesh, you had a question though?
Oh, well, I've forgotten what the question was.
There's a lot being talked about here.
I'd rather respond to this larger theme here a little bit because, look, I mean, Nick, you're 26, and so it's understandable that your view of history, you keep saying history, a regime change is about history, and the history you give is like 4 years old. Your compass is so narrow that you don't understand that I could give you 40 examples of regime change through history that have all worked out beautifully, some recent, some more ancient. There was regime change in Spain. Franco fell. Spain became a democracy. You had autocrats all over South America. Those regimes all changed. Many of those countries are much better off as a result. The United States produced regime change in Mexico. There was a dictator named Santana. He was the one who actually came and fought against us in the Alamo and in Texas. Ultimately, Santana was overthrown. That was excellent regime change. I'm not even counting, of course, the Nazi regime in Japan in World War II. The Soviet Union was regime change of an excellent quality. So regime change sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't work. A lot of times it depends kind of on who does it and how. Now, here's a key point, and of course, Alex has brought up Israel. I want to get into Israel, so I'm happy to do that. Here's the point I want to make. It is very much, in my view, in our interest and Israel to have regime change in Iran. And if Israel is willing to do it, I would say more power to them. I think Trump is stopping them. Trump says, no, I'm going to save the life of Khamenei. And so Trump, in this sense, I think, is more allergic to the risks of regime change and willing to keep the mullahs in power. But what's really important here is Israel is not controlling Trump. It's the other way around. If you leave it to Netanyahu, you leave it to the Knesset, they would like to overthrow the mullahs and they have the power to do it. And the fact that they're not doing it shows that, again, to use my old phrase, the great Satan is controlling the little Satan and not the other way around. There's another example just from today. Trump is basically pressuring Netanyahu to have a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. Now, first of all, Israel has every moral right to level Gaza. And what I mean by that is, quite honestly, when a country attacks you, when you are invaded, just like if there's a home invasion, some guy comes into my house, rapes my wife, kills my daughter, kills my kids, And then he runs away and I chase after him. And of course, I chase his car down. I stop him. He jumps out of the car, grabs his own kids and sticks them in front of him. And then he goes, "Don't shoot because women and children are in front of me." No, what you've done, you put your children in danger, first by invading my house, and second by using them as human shields. I am not under any moral strictures based on what you did to me. I have every right to attempt to destroy you, and the suffering of your women and children is the result of your actions and not mine. So my point is, once you had October 7th, and October 7th, by the way, bankrolled by Iran, planned in Iran, Israel has every right, strategic, moral, political, to strike out at Gaza and to strike at Iran. And so the United States is—
No, that's not true. I'm sorry, but I've been looking into this more. You cannot just starve and just strike and kill innocent people just because of that. They keep on using that one day as an example to terrorize these people. I am 100% against innocent people getting tortured and starved to death. That is never okay. And it's disgusting that Dinesh is using that one day as an example. We can say that was a terrible day, which it was, and say you shouldn't be able to just terrorize innocent people. Both sides are wrong in this one. That's what I believe.
Is the one that's tying their hands. And so once again, even with this Gaza treaty, you can see that the man in charge, the numero uno, is not Netanyahu, it's Trump.
Okay, so I want Nick to be able to come back. I got to say something here. Dinesh, you're a great guy. I respect you, love your films, interviewed 20 years. But the analogy of somebody breaking your house, raping and killing your wife and daughter, then you chase him down so he uses his kids. They're still innocent. And look, I get it, 50,000 dead in Gaza, the whole liberal media making it the biggest thing ever. I'm sad it happened. The left loves the war in Ukraine, over 1 million dead. But, and I understand what we did to Germany in World War II, I know Israel's argument. But to say then if somebody uses their own kids as human shields, I don't know, if somebody killed my wife and daughter, they use their kids as human shields, I'd wait till they drop the kids, or I'd, whatever. I just think it's an oversimplification.
Well, you wouldn't wait till they drop the kids. What you would look for a clean shot at them. But if you accidentally hit their kids, whose fault would it be, yours or theirs?
I get your point. That's fair. Touche. So go ahead, Nick. I'll stop interrupting.
Yeah, well, I forgive me, but I have to do this. You said that I'm a young man and my view of history is so short. Well, let's talk about some of your history here. You were a big supporter of the war in Iraq, and I want to actually read and go back to what you said about it in 2003 and 2007, because I think this is fair. You said in 2003 that Saddam's support for terrorism, his attempt to acquire nuclear weapons, makes him an imminent danger to world peace and security. That was in 2003. 4 years later, you said the important point about the wars is that 50 million Afghans and Iraqis are free. And for the first time in their history, they can control their own destiny. Liberals emphasize the negative and relish the failures of American foreign policy. Now, there's a lot of other quotes here, but this speaks to the kind of hubris of the neocons, of the interventionists, of advocates for regime change, which is, just like in 2003, there's this alarmism. They support terrorism.
All right, maybe the whole key on a
Sorry about the
string and a
commercials, guys. I'm
thunderstorm
trying to
thing
skip it
wasn't
as
my
fast as I
best
can.
idea.
They're building nuclear weapons. Now, both of those things turned out not to be true. There was no connection between al-Qaeda and Saddam. Saddam did not have nukes. Then there's this justification after the fact. Well, it doesn't matter because it's going fine. Well, 20 years later, guess who took over Iraq? Iran. Iran filled the power vacuum. Guess who retook over Afghanistan? The Taliban. So, you can talk about like Germany and Japan. I think those things are fundamentally different. For starters, because Japan attacked us first on our soil in Hawaii. I mean, that's fundamentally different. But in terms of regime change, this does harken back to Iraq. And I've seen your videos where you talk about the dissimilarities between the two situations. I think they're very similar. Now, as far as Iran, I don't even want to get into Gaza because that's a little bit, we can later, but I want to talk specifically about Iran. In one of your videos, you say, well, unlike Iraq, where we had to rely on government intelligence, with Iran, we know about their facilities. We know where they are. We've seen the tunnels. We've seen the centrifuges. We know what they're doing. Well, isn't that sort of precisely the point? When the United States made the nuclear deal with Iran, they adhered to it for years. The deal was made in 2015, and from 2015 to 2018, the IAEA said they were in compliance with the deal. They had 24-hour monitoring, they had cameras, they had inspections, and they were in compliance with the deal. It wasn't until a year after Trump pulled out of the deal and forced all the other Europeans to pull out as well. And we reneged on our commitments. We pulled out and didn't give them sanctions relief. We, through secondary sanctions, forced the Europeans to pull out, and they didn't get sanctions relief. It was only until 2019 that Iran started to gradually renege on their commitments. And it went in succession where America killed Qasem Soleimani, which is one of their generals. Then Iran began to enrich without limitations. They enriched and they engaged in all nuclear activities without any kind of restrictions. It wasn't until 2021 when Israel attacked Natanz twice, cyber attacks and sabotage attacks, that Iran began to enrich to 60%. Every action has this equal and opposite reaction. Iran was a partner in 2001. Iran helped us build the Northern Alliance. They helped us put Karzai in power in Afghanistan. A few months later, George Bush calls them the axis of evil. This is how we treat Iran. Now,
okay.
I'm not defending.
You. I'm just looking at the clock. You guys interrupt each other just every few minutes. Maybe I should just go bing, and the other person interrupts. You guys are so polite. Dinesh?
All right. Well, first of all, I want to do a mea culpa here because I was wrong about the Iraq war. Not because I said Iraq war, not because I said Iraq had nuclear weapons. Of course, you remember with George W. Bush, the claim was that they had these so-called weapons of mass destruction. Not quite the same as nukes, but the idea was it could be chemical weapons. It could be a weapon that could kill a large number of people. Now, this information, which was given to us from high levels in the US government, I think was the first case of where we learned that we can't always trust the government. And we can't trust the government because these intelligence agencies have their own agenda. And this was a neocon scam. And I got to say, I might have been a little too deeply in the neocon world. I went for it. But unlike a lot of the neocons, I broke with them. Most of my former colleagues at AEI won't speak to me. I left the neocon camp, which is now basically the Never Trump camp. And I came into the Trump camp because I think the Trump was based on the idea that, look, we've learned some valuable lessons from the Iraq war. And that is this idea of trying to occupy other countries is a great mistake. By the way, the United States had every right to blow up the Taliban, to chase them out of power. Those were the guys who supplied the monkey bars for 9/11. So if you're talking about a direct attack on the United States, yes, it was Al-Qaeda, but the Taliban was a hospitable regime that trained them. What we should have done is turned to some rival tribes, there are plenty of warlike tribes in Afghanistan, and said, listen, we're going to turn it over to you. You keep kicking their ass from now on, and we're out of here. But we didn't do that. We went over there. We started, conducting meetings and talking about women's rights and a whole bunch of nonsense. And the whole thing backfired on us. So that's a bitter lesson that we've learned. And I think I'm with you on that, Nick. All right. But Iran is a different animal. And I think this is the key. Iran is the one that is threatening Israel, not the other way around. What does Israel want out of Iran? You think Israel wants to go occupy Iran? You think Israel has designs on Iran? Israel has one of the smallest, most godforsaken pieces of earth on the planet. They are just trying to hold onto it. And by the way, it's theirs. Now, what do I mean by that? This is a very important issue because how do you get a country? I mean, how do you get the title deeds of a country? There are really only three ways.
You fight for them.
One way is you're the original inhabitants, right? Like the Native Americans are the original inhabitants. They go, it's ours. That's one way. The second way is there's some sort of a negotiation, a treaty, if someone gives it to you and you get it that way. A third way is conquest. That's how we got large parts of Mexico. That's how the United States now reaches from one end of the ocean to the other. We took a lot of it by force. So that's the third way. Most of the boundaries of most of the countries of the world are established by war and by nothing else. Now, interestingly, with America, you could say that on one side, the Native Americans have the right. They were here first, so they have the title deeds. And then you can say on the other side, well, we conquered them, we fought a war, they lost, that's that, so it's ours. But with Israel, all the arguments benefit Israel. They were the original inhabitants. They were there for 4,000 years, going back to the time of Abraham. Number two, they were awarded Israel by the United Nations in 1948. And number three, they have fought multiple wars, at least three, 1948, 1967, 1973. They beat the combined invading armies of Syria, Jordan, Egypt. So the Arab world united against them. They kicked their butts. And so whether you're looking at
Okay,
who's
that's
the
a
original
long run.
inhabitants
It was
or
fascinating.
who took it by
But, hold on,
conquest.
I just looked at the clock, like 5 minutes. So we're running over, Nick. I got to be fair. Nick, you got 5 minutes because I just let him run for 5 minutes. Go ahead. It was great. I was listening. Sorry, I got to go ahead.
Yeah, once again, it just gets back to the analytical framework for the conflict is that these are rational actors, and maybe we'll get into Israel's objectives. Iran wants a nuclear arsenal to deter an attack from the United States and Israel. I think that's a credible fear. The United States' interest is they do not want nuclear proliferation. So we don't want Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. We don't necessarily have an interest in regime change. Israel's strategic objective is to overthrow the government of Iran. And why? It goes back to the Likud party and their takeover of the government in the late 1970s. They witnessed what happened in the Camp David Accords, which is that Egypt got the Sinai back in exchange for peace. They witnessed some of the Israeli ministers try to negotiate with the Palestinians. They called it land for peace. We'll give you some of the West Bank in exchange for peace. We'll give Syria the Golan in exchange for peace was the idea. They thought that's what was going to happen. And these Likudniks, the people that have been running Israel basically for 50 years, nearly uninterrupted, they said, we can't keep giving up land in exchange for peace. They said, we need to go on the offensive. This is in Oded Yanon's plan for the 1980s. He was an advisor to Ariel Sharon. This is in the Clean Break Memo in 1996. And in both of these doctrines, and this is consistent throughout 20, 30-year period, they said, we need to go on the offensive, and we need to basically destroy all the big states that are supporting Palestine, all the big states that might pose a threat to Israel. And that is why they push for regime change against Saddam. That's why they push for destabilization of Syria. And ultimately, they saw Iran as sponsoring Hezbollah and the Shiite groups in southern Lebanon, and then eventually Hamas. And so Israel has an interest in what they call creating statelets. They don't want big, powerful regimes like Nasser's Egypt, like the Assad dynasty in Syria, like Gaddafi in Libya. They want small, manageable fiefdoms where they're going to dismember Libya into like 3 countries, dismember Syria into Druze, Alawite, and Sunni, dismember Iraq into Shiite, Kurdish, and Sunni. They want to do the same thing to Iran. And that is because, and I agree with you, Israel wants to be safe, but you characterize Israel as small and fledgling and just trying to hold on to their land. They're the only nuclear power, the most sophisticated, most powerful military and intelligence operation in the Middle East, as evidenced by this very one-sided conflict. And what they want to be safe is regional hegemony. In order to be safe from all threats, they want to make it so that there are no threats. That's why the road to Israeli safety and their right to exist runs through regime change, destabilization, and civil war. And so I'm saying, look,
scientists have just discovered there's a cell inside your brain acting like an invisible cancer, eating your nerves.
That's probably in their best interest, but it's not in ours. And so that's why I agree with Trump. We should pursue diplomacy with Iran and try to get them to give up their nuclear program with limitations and restrictions without regime change, which is unpredictable and has negative effects for us. Israel wants the regime change, and they want us to pick up the pieces and clean up after them, just as we did in all these other countries. And we deal with the terrorism and the hatred, and we deal with the high gas prices and all the rest of it. So that's the America First position. Restrain Israel from pursuing regime change, restrict Iran's nuclear program. You can use maximum pressure and Reagan doctrine to do it. I'm fine with that. But I think diplomacy is preferable, and that's in our interest to try it. That's my position.
Okay, so I want to go back to Dinesh here, and we're approaching 15 minutes of this. This is amazing. You guys stay as long as you want. I also want to get to questions from X, and I'll just say, because I'm not trying to throw this either way, I have complex views. I know it's all nuanced. I think both of you are making great points, and I'm public about that. I want to blow up Israel, and I also, and I don't like the mullahs, but I don't want to have war with Iran. I know most of the people don't even like it. My issue is, we saw Netanyahu strike them first and drag us in. And look, I know that they're proxies. Iran's been striking them in Lebanon and in the West Bank and Gaza and with the Houthis. And I mean, no one can say who started it first, okay? And Iran, does make all these statements, rhetorical. We're going to drive you in the ocean and blow you up and all the rest of it. Okay, so my larger, sure. Dinesh, I'm gonna go to you. I've been pretty good here. I just want to, and I got some questions coming up here very soon for both of you, and then we're going to go to questions. But honing in, because both of you guys are very smart, and I'd like to hear it's a debate, but also a discussion. What do you think's about to happen? I know, Dinesh, you have amazing context. Trump today says twice at Alligator Alcatraz that Oh, we got a deal Monday. You're gonna love.
Who else loves the alligator Alcatraz that Florida is opening right now for these illegal immigrants? I'm so for that. Put all these sex traffickers, illegals, pedophiles, groomers, and gang members in these places so they can get taken out of society, so they can't wreak havoc on the American people. I'm so for that.
Of it, and Netanyahu's coming and all this, and usually Trump doesn't just bluff. That sounds really good. Then you have the mullahs putting out a very rare fatwa against Trump and Netanyahu on Sunday. So just in general, looking at that, but I will just say, Israel initiating the latest round and us coming into it a week into it, and then all of that, and then I could predict the media was going to say didn't take out the sites. Clearly, the sites were highly damaged or obliterated. But then did they hide fissile material? Then the mullahs are, we're going to go all the way to enrichment, and we did hide it. And it's like, to get out of this, the mullahs seem to do whatever it is keeps it going. It's very bizarre. So it's easy for me on like straight Western politics to know who the sides are, what the interests are. When you get into these mullahs and things, it gives me a headache, basically. So, you know, you mean as a moderator, I'm supposed to just have easy answers here. A lot of bizarre behavior. Why would the mullahs put a fatwa out? Well, because maybe they're about to fall. We're seeing some evidence. Their foreign minister on TV contradicting them, saying the nuclear sites were basically destroyed. So the intel I'm getting is they could fall. What happens if the mullahs are cornered then? And you see, this just is a complex issue. So you guys can finish up with your round of debates about the history and who's who or whatever. My point is, these are two sides absolutely diametrically opposed to each other. And like Trump said, both sides don't know what the fuck they're doing. They've been fighting so long. I agree with that. How could, generally, gut level, where do both of you see this going? We'll go to Dinesh first and finish up with Nick's response if you want. But then where do you see this going next? Can this be de-escalated? What are the paths out of this, Dinesh D'Souza?
We need to get rid of the neocons, first of all. No one in Trump's sphere needs to be a neocon or a warmonger. Two, we need to focus on America policy and making America great again and stop worrying about overseas wars. There's a start.
Yeah, the reason I keep anchoring our discussion, not just in history, but kind of in the facts on the ground, is because it's hard to have a debate when the facts are really fuzzy, right? So you mentioned, Alex, that Netanyahu struck first. But if it is true that Iran was a driving force behind October 7th, then Israel did not strike first. Israel struck second. Second of all, let's remember a lot of times, I mean, if we go back in history, not very far, you know, Hitler attacks Poland and Great Britain declares war on Germany. Japan attacks the United States at Pearl Harbor. Did we just go to war with Japan? No, we didn't. We sent Patton starts taking US troops into Europe. We went after the Nazis, even though the Nazis did not attack us directly. It was the Japanese who did. All right, let me turn to Nick. Nick says that it's the goal of Israel to somehow topple all the big, strong powers in the Middle East. And let's test if that's true. Which are the big, strong powers in the Middle East? And the answer is, certainly in the Muslim world, there are three. There is Saudi Arabia, there is Egypt, and there is Iran. These are the three big boys of the Middle East. And they are jostling, by the way, for power, the one against the other. Israel has excellent relations with two out of the three. Now, the only reason Israel doesn't have excellent relations with Iran is Iran continues to not only plot and scheme, but openly declare and fund military forces, Hezbollah, also Hamas, that are aimed ultimately at eradicating Israel from the map. That's the meaning of from the river to the sea. So Israel is willing to get along with powerful forces in the region. It's made friends with some of them. It gave back land to Egypt. It's on good terms with Saudi Arabia. I think it would be on good terms with Iran if Iran wasn't driving the aggression from its side. So I completely reject Nick's idea that somehow Iran is fighting a defensive war. Nobody wants to invade Iran, least of all Israel. Israel would like to have nothing to do with Iran. They've got a successful society on their own. Now, you're asking about Trump and kind of where all of this is going. And I think I want to highlight the simple point that, look, Trump is actually a kind of master of this kind of, well, I'm going to call it mafia diplomacy. By that, I mean that he acts like Don Corleone. He twists people's arms. He basically tries to pull everybody into line. And sort of this idea, number one, when Trump basically even started talking about the idea of striking the Iranian facilities, there was a massive scream on the part of the, let's call it the Nick Fuentes camp, but there were many others in it. This is disastrous. We're going to be in a war. We're going to have tremendous casualties. The Iranians are going to strike back at us. Just wait for it. None of this actually happened. So if I'm going to show a little modesty about Iraq, it would be good for Nick to admit that he and so many others were completely wrong about what the effect of Trump's strikes were going to be. Number two, Israel is a country of 10 million people or 12 million people. The United States is 350 million plus. Are you seriously telling me that Israel is controlling America?
All right, let's stop there. You just got 4 minutes. Let's Nick.
Yes, before Nick responds, yes, I believe that. It is all through Jeffrey Epstein, Diddy. They control him through these blackmail operations, through human trafficking, and I believe, and I'm starting to believe, because I keep saying everyone talking about the Mossad being the #1 group that was mixed up with the Epstein files that they used to blackmail other countries and top politicians around the world. I do believe that, and I keep on hearing that people I trust say that. So until I'm proven wrong, that's how I'm going to think.
Then we're going to go to break and come back. I've got questions, and then listeners have questions from X. Nick responding to that.
Sure. So to address the first point, Saudi Arabia is not a major power in the Middle East. We give them a lot of weapons and things like that, but Saudi Arabia has a small population, mostly foreign workers. It's held together by this weird dynasty from 100 years ago because they sell oil. They couldn't even defeat the Houthis in Yemen. I mean, they were at war with the Houthis for 10 years with American backing. They said they were fighting Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. They couldn't beat back these guys. They're pirates, effectively. So Saudi Arabia is not a major power. And what's more is they're effectively in a relationship with Israel already. They, like the Emirates, like Bahrain, are going to enter into the Abraham Accords. They're submitted to Israel. And that's the fate. If you are against the West, if you're against Israel and the United States, you get overthrown, you get regime changed, you get invaded, civil warred, or you're like Egypt and Jordan, where you get bribed and become a Western puppet to Israel, and Saudi Arabia wants to follow suit. So I would just say that, and that's obviously the case also because Netanyahu and other ministers in the Israeli government have said for 30 years they want regime change in Iran. That's just not even disputed.
That's
in the mid-1990s, they're calling for regime change.
It's on camera, on video.
In 2006, Netanyahu's calling for regime change. They're publishing videos all the time in Farsi and English saying the Iranian people need to rise up. It's just not even a question that they do want that. And they want that because Iran is a rival. Iran has one of the largest populations. It's often said about the Middle East, you've got 3 countries, Turkey, Egypt, Iran. The rest are tribes of flags. Iran has a big middle class, big economy, oil wealth. They have a lot of intelligent people. They're a threat to Israel's security and hegemony in the region. And that's why Israel wants to depose that country, along with all the other ones with ambitions, whether they be Islamist or pan-Arabist. With regard to Israel, and we can maybe get into this topic because I think we sort of settled a lot of this other stuff. We're looping a bit. But to get to the question of Israel driving U.S. foreign policy, it's pretty clear. Trump initiated diplomacy with Iran.
Take a look at this map. The purple spots on this map mark the locations of hidden fortunes stored in the United States.
In April, he had Netanyahu at the White House for talks about the tariffs, and he announced that he was going to engage Iran in negotiations over the nuclear program. That same day, Netanyahu went on TV and said the only deal we will accept is if we get to blow up Iran's nuclear program and if they follow the Libya model. The Libya model is where Libya gave up their nukes with inspections and then we regime changed them 8 years later. And that was obviously a poison pill to blow up the talks. They've said repeatedly, just last week, the defense minister came out and said, we are pursuing decapitation of the supreme leader. And when asked, did you get permission from the United States? He said, we don't need permission on such matters. And I believe, of course, you absolutely do. I wish it was as you're describing, where we are in control of Israel and they're our client. This has never been the case. Israel was the driving force behind the road to the war in Iraq. They're the driving force behind the road to the war in Iran. And the question of, and this is the last thing, just briefly, was I wrong about the strikes in Iran? We're not in a war in Iran. Of course we're in a war in Iran. Trump killed Soleimani in 2020. He comes back into office and picks up where he left off. Israel attacks Iran, and then we bomb Fordo. And this is going to be the case in the future. Iran says they're not giving up enrichment. The United States says you have to have 0% enrichment. It's setting the stage for more strikes. We've been in a state of hostilities.
Okay. Nick Fuentes, stay right there. We're going to take a break here. I'm going to ask both of you during the break, or the producer is, how long you want to stay. I'll go another 50 minutes. I'll go another hour and a half, 2 hours. Oh, 5 hours. This is riveting. And I think this is a really very professional, intellectual debate. This is not people trying to make points for the other person. They're both very knowledgeable. This is a very former head of a federal agency, best-selling author, filmmaker, super scholar. Nick, for 26, you disagree with his politics, agree with him. The guy's a phenomenon. I don't know any 26-year-old knows half what he knows. It's very refreshing to hear this. I'm not saying he's going over the audience head. Our audience is way more advanced than most people, but I imagine a lot of people, millions watching on X right now. This is a big viral thing. I'm having to, like, a lot of what they're saying, like, remember it? And, oh, yeah. So I'm having trouble following some of this with Dinesh, some of the things he's saying, and Nick, that I think about it and go, oh, yeah, that's true. So it was, this is not baby time here. This is not, real simple, mindless slogans. This is a real debate here. And this is what debates, I think, really should be, like the Lincoln Douglas debates. So we'll find out how long they want to stay. This is a whole other issue. Because I told the crew on the X post, asking, what are your questions when the debate launched? We can't find out of thousands of questions, maybe 10 that are pro-Israel. And I'm not, again, I don't want to just come on here and read anti-Israel stuff. I want to get both sides for a debate. We literally, which the poll numbers show, the whole world's turning against Israel. And they got nuclear weapons. Like Michael Savage is pro-Israel. He came on last Friday, but he said, no, Israel's going the wrong way. The whole world's turning against them. This is going to get Israel destroyed. They got nukes. I mean, whether you love Israel or hate them, they get cornered. Samson option. So, I'm sitting here telling the crew.
That's the crazy part. It's like Israel's like, Iran, you can't have nukes, but we can have nukes and we can strike you. It's a double standard, and the people aren't falling for it. If you're going to say other countries cannot have nukes, you yourself should not have nukes. That's just how I think. It has to be even across the board.
Get me a pro-Israel comment on X. And literally, they found like one. I've got an issue here. They're all, it's out of control. Dinesh is a great guy. I'll put him in jail. He was put in jail by Obama for supporting Trump. So, and by the way, I'm very thankful for Trump overall on domestic policy, economy, everything. I think he did what he thought was best with the Iran strikes. I hope it works out. And we need to be adults about this. We don't be like the left that calls for arresting anyone we disagree with. And I'm just being honest here. I think it's shocking. Everybody's on X saying arrest Dinesh D'Souza. Don't worry. It's already happened to him. So, this is out, and I'm not trying to. Sorry. You get 2 minutes before we go to break. Go ahead.
I was saying maybe what we can do is do a brief sort of summary of our positions for a couple of minutes, and then let's set a time and take questions, and we can each get a chance to answer them. Let's see, it's a little after 8 Central Time. Why don't we go till 9 if Nick's agreeable? I think we had sort of agreed we'll do 2 hours total. And so I'm good with that.
No, sounds good. You know what I can do? You know what I can do? Because I got no serious questions on X. It's just, I'll read some of these. They're good questions, but it's all like foaming at the mouth, just whatever. The point is, I'll read them, okay? I'm just being honest. Like, I wanted to get both sides. I'm not getting it. Well, we'll fire the phones up. But I want at least an hour. So let's go to 10 after 9. I'll get that both from you because I want to take a bunch of comments. Here's the toll-free number. Fire up the phone system. Never fear, the phones are here. We'll have people call and actually have some real questions. I'm not like, oh, look at Joel trying to get pro-Israel questions. No, I'm not just going to like literally read 50 questions in a row anti-Israel. I want to get both sides for a real debate. So the toll-free number, we're firing the system up right now, 877-789-2539, 877-789-2539, 877-789-ALEX. But it shows you just 2 years ago, half the stuff would be pro-Israel. That's a whole nother issue of what the poll numbers show, the world turning against Israel, which, again, even if you hate Israel, they got nuclear weapons. They're not going away unless it's in Armageddon. 877-789-2539. Dinesh D'Souza is a best-selling author and one of the top documentary filmmakers in all time, probably the #1 documentary for actual grosses. Dinesh D. D'Souza, DineshD'Souza.com. And, of course, you can find Nick Fuentes on Rumble, where he dominates, at Nick J. Fuentes on X, NicholasJFuentes.com. We're going to take a short little 4-minute break, and we're going to let both men have 6 minutes. That way they get plenty of time to make a summation, and then we will take some phone calls and read some blow Israel off the map comments on air. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The biggest sale in the history of thealexjonesstore.com is now live. It's the 1776 July 4th, 2025 mega.
Beginning. So why doesn't Nick go first for 6 and I'll go for 6 and then we'll go to questions?
Perfect. And then I have one question after that, but Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, sounds good to me. So to sum up sort of what we've been talking about so far, the question is, what is America first? What's putting America first? I'm not pro-Iran. I'm not an isolationist, or I'm not even necessarily opposed to the United States engaging other countries abroad. What I am opposed to is a policy that isn't in our interest. And I think that regime change is something that historically in the Middle East never goes our way. It leads to chaos, civil war, ethnic cleansing, failed states, worse regimes than we got before. I think the U.S. interest in Iran is to prevent them from acquiring a nuclear bomb. I don't think they're pursuing one right now. I think they have a latent threat to deter regime change from Israel. And I think that on the flip side of that, Israel has been pushing for regime change in Iran like they have in virtually every other country for 30 years. That's why the America First position, how do we balance these two competing states, which are, they both have their religious zealotry. They both have their share of terrorism. Neither of them are the United States. How do we balance those competing forces in the Middle East? I think we restrain Israel from pursuing regime change in Iran. I think we make a deal with Iran to restrict their nuclear activity. And that comes from a deep respect and humility about the nature of regime change, the size of Iran, the undertaking that regime change would be, and with respect to what our own foreign policy is. I think that we had a nuclear deal with Iran and it was going well. They were abiding by it. We had monitoring. We had 24/7 cameras. We knew what they were doing. We have engaged Iran in good faith before. They've demonstrated by telegraphing strikes and through calibrating them that they're rational, that they can be patient strategically. And I think that we should attempt to do that again. I think that Trump and Biden both tried to do that over the past 12 years. They've been repeatedly sabotaged by Israel. Their dream is to drag us into a confrontation where we fight their regime change war for them. And I think that's something that serves only the interest of Israeli hegemony and not the interest of American strategic withdrawal and removal from the Middle East so that we could focus on our real rival, which is China. So that's kind of my big picture view. And it's based on fundamental assumptions about the nature.
The number one enemy of us is China. That's who we should be focused on. And I believe that's what he said. I hope he didn't say that they were our friends, because I think China is the number one enemy of the world right now.
Of Iran's regime and what Iran wants. And the same is true about Israel, what the nature of the Israeli regime is and what they want. And so that's a summary of what I think the America First position is in this conflict.
All right. So you only went for like less than 3 minutes. Dinesh D'Souza.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief as well. I've been trying to sort of figure out Nick Fuentes as this debate has been going on. And I've come to a kind of startling conclusion. I mean this only tentatively because I don't know enough about Nick. But from what I'm hearing, basically Nick Fuentes is a Democrat. And what that means is that he can't be America First because he is echoing all the tired, discredited, have faith in the goodwill of our enemies.
Grab your AR and get in, soldier. I need you to sighten your weapon. No.
Have faith in treaties. This is what Democrats said throughout Reagan.
This dude called Nick Fuentes a Democrat because he doesn't want to help other countries fight in their wars and wants to focus on America. Dinesh, I'm sorry, you lost me there 100%. You're tripping calling him a Democrat.
Throughout the Cold War, let's trust the Russians. They're trustworthy. They want peace too, don't they? And now, we have Nick and he's like, we had a deal. Well, it was Obama's deal, remember? You think Obama was a good guy? You think Obama was America First? What do you think Obama was up to? America last. Obama's idea was let's strengthen our enemies and undermine our friends. Why do you think he got rid of Mubarak in Egypt? Because he was an ally of the United States. And then we got the Muslim Brotherhood in power in Egypt. That was not, Obama is not the same as Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was an idiot. He was a nincompoop. We'll give him the Presidential Nincompoopery Award. Obama's malevolent. Obama represents ultimately, if you follow what Obama says, it's basically what our enemies want and not what we want. And so notice, Nick, how close your position is to Obama. The Iranians are reasonable. The Iranians don't have any imperialistic ambitions. They don't have any real ill will toward Israel. Their militarization is purely defensive. We can make a peaceful deal with them. The only thing you didn't say is we should give them a whole bunch of money. I guess that's your one difference with Obama, is you wouldn't give them the pallets of cash that Obama turned over. But otherwise, you're saying pretty much the same thing. Now, here's what I'm saying, which is the opposite. In the world, America has allies and we have enemies. our enemies, our rivals, their adversaries, they wish us ill. They would do regime change over here if they could. And who are some of those people? Well, China, to some degree, Russia, certainly Iran. And so if you read Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, the whole idea is you want to weaken your enemies and strengthen your friends. That's what America First means. It means promoting American interests in the world. And you seem to be promoting the opposite. You seem to be saying, well, enemies aren't that bad, and our friends aren't our real friends. Why don't we put some pressure on our friends, and why don't we trust our enemies more? I mean, this is basically straight out the logic of the Democratic Party. It's been disproven time and time again. And I think you're wrongly drawing lessons from the Iraq War that are basically turning you into a 26-year-old Obama.
Okay, so I said 6-minute closing comments, but Nick went less than 3. You just went less than 3. So let's keep going here. Nick, I'm sure you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I didn't really expect where you were going with that, but in retrospect, I should have. When you said this is tentative, and I just met you, I thought maybe it was going to be positive, but I should have known it was going to be he's a Democrat. It's just a very strange thing that the moral universe you live in seems to be based on partisanship. It's Republicans and Democrats, like the KKK, the Nazis, Iran, like every ideology that's against like America and Israel's interests can be kind of molded into this like Democrat Party narrative. The thing is about Democrats and Republicans, I don't think there's a big difference. We have the same national security apparatus. Obama had the same defense secretary as Bush.
I agree. I mean, they are funding illegals with free Medicare. I believe it was voted on, and Republicans voted for it yesterday. There are a lot of America First conservatives, very few. And then there's Trump, who is America First. I do think Trump has some bad people on his side who he needs to fire immediately. But besides that, most of the politicians are exactly the same, like Fuentes did say. But we do have some good people on our side. I will admit that.
And we maintained very much a similar foreign policy under Obama that we did under Bush. And then again under Trump, Biden, and then Trump again. I think we have a deep state, the Pentagon, CENTCOM, National Security Council, the Directorate of National Intelligence, the IC. I mean, all these people are permanent bureaucrats. I don't think there's a lot of daylight between Republicans and Democrats. I think that's a meaningless distinction. I wouldn't say, I don't know what that means to be a Democrat. I'm a Catholic. I'm a reactionary. I'm in favor of immigration moratorium. I voted for Trump in 2016. Like, I don't know where you get off saying I'm a Democrat other than that. I think we should pursue diplomacy. And by the way, it's not based on good faith towards our enemies like Iran or Russia or China for that matter. It's based and anchored again in foreign policy realism. I'm a realist. I'm not a liberal internationalist or a liberal globalist where I believe there's a world of friendly democracies and autocratic foes. I would say that Israel is similarly a foe. Israel spies on Americans. Israel has planned and perpetrated false flag attacks against Americans in the past. When 9/11 happened, Bibi Netanyahu said it's a good thing because now we can sympathize with what they go through. And they looked at that as a gift because they thought that we would support them against the Palestinians, and then we would support them against their other rivals in the region. So this idea that we have friends and foes and the Israel's part of the Avengers and the Iran is part of the bad guys. I think this is just juvenile and childish. And it's like I'm debating Fox News, this kind of stuff about.
Okay, so since we went off the debate format, which is fine, Dinesh, counter that and back to Nick, brief response back. But I have a few questions for you that I want to go to callers and I want to go to comments on X. But Dinesh, anything back?
Yeah, the polarization of the world is not the result of some sort of ideological fantasy. It's a simple reality. You can see it in the animal kingdom. If there are two strong animals that are in a herd, they will fight each other for leadership. If there are two powerful countries in the world, they will become rivals, and the small countries around them will basically take sides, and you will begin to see this kind of polarization.
So survival of the fittest.
It's not survival. It's a description of a power struggle that drives international relations. And you'll be very naive if you don't see that force is at the bottom of international politics. Now, domestically, American politics is divided generally into two camps. Now, I realize that Nick wants to say, oh, they're just the same. But just think of the stupidity of saying that, because if they're just the same, it would make no difference if Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan won the 1980 election. I honestly believe that if Reagan wasn't in power for 2 terms, the Soviet Union might not have collapsed. In a sense, Nick is saying he voted for Trump in 16, but it didn't really matter. It wouldn't have mattered if Hillary was president because Hillary would have been pretty much the same as Trump. And similarly, Nick is saying now that he wouldn't mind really if Kamala Harris won the 2024 election, because after all, the country would be pretty much the same because the 2 parties are a uniparty. And as to quote him, these are meaningless distinctions. Well, I think the whole idea of America First, of MAGA, of Trump is based on the idea that, look, yes, there are common forces. The intelligence agencies have been a malign influence in both parties. And there is a kind of drinking at the swamp establishment, and Republicans and Democrats are part of that. But nevertheless, there are distinctions that really matter. This country already in just a few months is very different than it would be if Kamala Harris. The border would not be secure. We wouldn't be looking at making these tax cuts permanent. We wouldn't be looking at 10,000 new border agents. And on it goes. We would be dealing with the trans phenomenon, would be shoved down our throats. Probably, Nick, you and Alex would still be thrown off social media. So the Trump phenomenon matters. Trump has made a difference. I'm not saying that Trump is not open to criticism. I'm not saying that MAGA means some kind of we all have to follow Trump like the Pied Piper. But what I am saying is that Trump has proven far more often to be right than wrong. And if I'm choosing between the foreign policy
thank you. Brief comeback from Nick.
I think I'm going to go with Trump.
All right, I understand. Nick, quick comeback, and then I got a couple questions for you guys, and I want to go to questions from the audience.
Yeah, I mean, as far as all of this is concerned, Trump and Biden and Kamala and all of that, I would say yes. I don't think it's even controversial at this point to say that there really is no distinction, especially when it concerns matter of foreign policy. I mean, Biden gave Israel $20 billion last year when Israel was in peril, when Israel was fighting this war in Gaza and against the Houthis and Hezbollah. It was Biden last year in April that gave Israel $20 billion, which is a huge military aid package. And Biden showed up when Iran retaliated against Israel in April of last year, and then again in October of last year, and even earlier when Israel initiated these provocations earlier in July and in April of 24. It was Biden that deployed the carriers to protect Israel and shoot down all the incoming missiles from Iran and from Hezbollah and from the Houthis, and actually offensively bombed them. Bomb the Houthis, bomb the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. And for all people like to say, the Democrats are abandoning our friends and empowering our enemies. No, actually the opposite is true. Biden gave this huge aid package to Ukraine, our big ally. They gave a huge aid package to Israel, our big ally. So I think
I'm against all of these packages to all of these countries. We need to focus all of our resources on America only.
Whether we had Kamala or Trump, we would be engaging in strikes against Iran right now. I don't think anyone.
Never waste.
Sorry, guys, I'm going to skip that.
Just give me a sec. Again. This tiny upgrade allows.
Even doubts that slightly. And so the question again, what is America? I don't care about being Republican and Democrat. It means nothing to me. I'm independent. I'm America first. It's a question of what's in our interest. And you can appeal to this tribalism and say, you sound like Jimmy Carter. Okay, that's 50 years ago. What's in America's interest is not another regime change war, no matter our level of involvement. It's too unpredictable. It's too much chaos. There's no guarantee we'll get something better or something that isn't horribly worse. This is what Israel wants. This is not what we want. We want nuclear non-proliferation. They want regime change.
Okay.
We should have non-proliferation.
Okay. Now, and again, it's great. It's amazing. I want to go to comments, questions. This is huge. Millions are tuning in right now, just on X alone, millions everywhere else. This is a real raw debate, folks. When you see corporate media, the questions are already prepared. It's been planned for months or weeks. This is real, unfiltered. None of us talk before the show other than text messages. Hey, are you ready to come on the show? That's it. So this was raw. This is what it's all about. This is real media. We're so blessed to be here. So thankful to the crew. So blessed for all the listeners and viewers tuning in and the clips of this going viral everywhere. This is what it's all about. Let me ask you both this question. I know you're both pundits and both analysts and you have your views, and I think you both come from a position of realism and integrity that you believe what you're saying. We all see the rose-colored darklies, but we believe what we're saying. Sometimes we're a little bit wrong, and mostly right maybe. But I want you to both do, and basically as a favor to me, do what I do. And I know you both do this because Nick, said, I think Trump's very soon will, hit Iran when he was running for office. The last time, 8-9 months ago, right before he got elected. And he thought this would be a big crisis. And I know, Dinesh has made a lot of predictions come true. I want to ask you both, first Dinesh, then Nick, gut level. I think Trump thought he did the right thing, believed he was shutting this down, putting back the nuclear program. The left and others won't do that. They want to keep it going, which then adds the more rules are saying, don't worry, we're going to enrich. You're not going to stop us. I see this as the beginning of quagmire. I have a really bad feeling about where it's going. So here's the simple question, which is a super complex question. The most simple questions are, they look simple, but they're not. How do you gut level see this ending, Dinesh D'Souza? Regime change, wider war, Iran rolling over, gut level, how do you see this ending, and how would you like to see it end? And what do you think we as American people can do to have this end in a peaceful way?
Before he answers, I think this could have put us in a very dangerous situation. We have a lot of sleeper cells in our country, thanks to the previous administration. So they could have activated sleeper cells in the country, which could have been very bad for our homeland. So I was against the bombing, 100%. I agree on Trump when it comes to almost everything, but when it comes to the Iran situation, I was 100% against. He's pretty much playing Jeopardy with the American people's lives when it comes to them, again, having sleeper cells due to the open border under the last administration. But good thing it did end up working out in our favor. I hope it stays that way, but I'm not for going into other countries and bombing them or putting in new leadership ever. We should focus on America first only, and that's it.
All right. I think that the Trump strike on the 3 nuclear facilities was a brilliant move because it was basically what it was is essentially an overnight job. We fly over there, we clobber their nuclear facilities, we don't suffer a single casualty. They don't even know we're there. They have no control over their own skies. We had all these fighter planes, by the way, accompanying those B-2 bombers because B-2 bombers can't defend themselves. But not a single fighter plane was really needed. They ended up just flying sort of decoratively around the B-2 bombers for no good reason. And then they all came back safely. And what is the result? A crippling of Iran's nuclear facilities. So look, whether they were at 80%, whether they were getting there, whether they were almost there, whether they were weeks away, whether they were months away, who cares? The program has now suffered a devastating setback. And even though initially the media tried to deny it, they've now pretty much come out and admitted it. Machiavelli says something very profound. People can get revenge for small injuries, but they cannot get revenge for large injuries. And what that means is that by and large, when you go poke somebody, they're going to come back and poke you back in the eye. On the other hand, if you give such a devastating blow from which they can never recover, they are too preoccupied with their own survival to even worry about you anymore. It's going to take a long time for Iran to get back on its feet. Now, I think that the mullahs are going to try to survive, to hang in there, to slowly rebuild their power. And so this is actually the downside of striking and then leaving, in a sense, sort of snatching partial victory out of the jaws of total victory. Because I don't think we're very far away from the mullahs essentially running away. There were even reports that some of the top Iranian officials were already starting to leave the country. And just before the regime falls, we go, oh, well, we better stop. We don't really care about, quote, regime change. And so
yeah, but that's because Trump doesn't want a quagmire, Dinesh. Who knows who's going to come into the vacuum?
We never know, Alex. But the point is, when you have these dangerous situations in the world, you have to make a judgment call about whether what's going to come later is better or worse. We have certain red lines. One of them is we're not committing troops. We're not going to commit troops unless Iran attacks U.S. borders or U.S. bases. If they do that, then Trump's, we're not in a war, has to be set to the side. So
let me raise this now that we're deep into this. I got a few questions, Nash. If the mullahs are so insane and they just put a fatwa out, which goes to that side of the equation, on the other side, they did like in 2020 when they attacked the Iraq base and called Trump before and said we're going to launch 18 missiles in the desert. And they did as a face-saving event. They did that again this time, called ahead when they were going to hit Qatar and did that. So if they're so crazy, why did they then telegraph all this and try to de-escalate?
Because, like I said, come back to the quote from Machiavelli, when somebody is down on their back and you're standing on top of them with your foot on their chest, they're going to behave themselves wonderfully. They're going to be Iran did not actually want to strike us. because they realize, of course, the logic. If they strike us, we're going to strike them 10 times harder. And so they were like good pussycat. They basically were like, we'll behave ourselves. We'll pretend to attack you, and you pretend to go ouch, ouch, ouch. I mean, this is actually the definition of total victory. If you get into an MMA fight with some guy, and at the end he goes, listen, I want to convince my family that I'm not a wimp, so I'll pretend to throw a punch at the very end, and you pretend that you're bending over even though you've clearly won the fight. What does that tell you?
And so you say maybe the fatwa is that as well? How do we know some of their followers don't follow that order?
We don't know that, and I think we should take preparations to. I'm not a believer, as Nick is, in Iranian goodwill. I think if they put fatwas on you, there are going to be radical Muslims who are going to be willing to carry it out. There are probably some of those in this country. So we need to be taking preemptive or precautionary steps.
Well, yeah, I think
to make
no
sure
doubt.
that we are
I think no
protected.
doubt. So yeah, Nick, that's a lot to unpack. Go ahead.
Yeah, to answer the original question, where this is going, I think we're trapped. I think we're trapped in a situation where now it's inevitable that there will be more tension. There will be more tension. There will be more conflict. We're not getting out of this. And it basically comes down to this. We had a deal with Iran. We overcame decades of distrust and decades of suspicion from Iran. We made a deal that satisfied Russia, China, the E3 countries, the European, France, Germany, and the UK, and the United States. We had a deal with monitoring, with verification, with 24/7 cameras. Like Dinesh himself said, we know everything about their program because they disclosed it to us. And the IAEA report said they had no weapons program since at least 2009, but probably not meaningfully since 2003. So we had a deal. Everybody was playing by the rules for years. Trump pulled us out, and now they don't trust us again. Trump killed their general. Now they hate us. Then Trump engages them in diplomacy, and he comes back to power. And there's all this fanfare about they're going to make a deal. We might be able to make terms with the United States. And what does Trump do? He says, we knew the whole time this was a ploy for a sneak attack by Israel to attack Iran. Then we come in and bomb them. And contrary to what Dinesh says, if there's some new report, I haven't seen it. On the contrary, U.S. intelligence, Europeans, Iran, and Israel all have said we did not destroy Fordo. We didn't even destroy their nuclear stockpile. They said we weren't even trying to destroy their nuclear stockpile. So now what they're saying is Iran still has a stockpile. They have centrifuges we don't know about. Iran says we're never giving up enrichment. They're moving heavy equipment to Fordo to rebuild it. And what are the Israelis saying? The Israelis are saying we're going to treat Iran like Lebanon, which means we're going to bomb them all the time with no restriction. So, this ceasefire, Israel never makes good on ceasefires. They made one with Hamas. They didn't implement the second phase. They made one with Hezbollah. They bomb them throughout. None of them trust Israel. None of them trust us. And now, if we don't make a deal with Iran, there really is only one other option. Iran doesn't trust us. Russia didn't bail them out. They're clearly vulnerable to Israeli intelligence. The only deterrent that they can get to prevent further hostilities, now they're talking about pulling out of the NPT and maybe getting a nuclear weapon. So as far as I'm concerned, our fate is sealed. And Israel they orchestrated this every step of the way.
All right, maybe the whole key on a kite string in a thunderstorm thing wasn't my best idea.
Engineered the confrontation in April last year. They attacked Iranian generals in Syria. They provoked the other confrontation in July. They killed the leader of Hamas in Tehran.
Nick, I want to go to comments and questions now. Both of you are making very interesting points. Quick analysis.
Can I just do a really quick one?
Go ahead.
Just a really quick, quick response, because it seems to me that Nick has been moving in a kind of crab fashion, saying one thing, contradicting it, then saying the opposite, then saying the opposite again. And here's what I mean. At the beginning of this debate, Nick, you said emphatically, Iran has every good defensive reason to want to build a nuclear weapon. You said Israel has nuclear weapons, and so Iran, in order to counter Israel, needs to have a nuclear weapon on its own. Then you said, but even though it's in their interest to build a nuclear weapon, albeit defensively, somehow a treaty is going to convince them not to do it. It's kind of like saying it's in my interest to do something, but because you put a piece of paper in front of me, I'm going to go, gee, I'm not going to do that because I'm such a nice guy. No, if it's in Iran's interest to build a nuclear weapon, they're going to try to do it openly or covertly, but they're going to try to do it one way or the other, according to your own logic. Then you said, we tried to bomb their facility. And you said, but you know what? We probably didn't do a very good job. And a lot of their nuclear facilities are in place. And in fact, they might just turn around and build a nuclear weapon. Now, you just told us that Iran has no desire to build a nuclear weapon. You told us earlier that it's against Islam. They've made some Islamic proclamation against it. But now you're telling us, first of all, that there were obviously some fairly advanced facilities. We tried to bomb them, but unsuccessfully. So they're still in place. And gee, if the Iranians get really mad, they can now just get together and put that nuclear bomb together. Well, obviously, that means if it's in their interest to do it, and they're not that far from doing it now, we were certainly right to bomb them. If anything, we should have had a second round of bombing to make sure we finished the job, according to you.
I want Nick to be able to comment. I'll keep you guys all night, but I want to go to these comments. You guys got to say we can do that. Callers and comments. But Nick, back to my question, respond to Dinesh. Quick summation. How do you see this ending? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but currently, where's this going?
Regime, like I said, I think we're trapped. It's going to end in regime change one way or the other. As far as the apparent contradictions, I said at the start that they are engaging in nuclear hedging. And what does that mean? It means that they have the infrastructure, the expertise, and the technology to make a bomb if the security situation demands it. The reason they probably could have developed a bomb by 2012. The earliest estimate says that Iran could have had a bomb. They had all the pieces in place by 2010. And the longest term timeline, 2012, is when they could have had a bomb. Why did they not do that? Because getting a bomb would invite aggression, because the United States has a non-proliferation doctrine. But not having any latent ability would be weakness. And that would also invite aggression. Countries that don't have nukes can be destroyed by countries that have them. So that's why it's hedging. It's
so
hedging their
development.
Wait. Let me finish, because this is really important. So the reason why the deal changes this dynamic is because if we can give Iran confidence and assurances, we are not going to invade you. We don't have designs on overthrowing you. Then Iran can have restrictions on their nuclear program, and they can ensure us they're not going to weaponize. I said there's other countries that do this too. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, they're hedging as well. Why do they have nuclear programs? North Korea and China. Now, the reason they don't have nuclear bombs is because they can rely upon the United States to deter attacks from North Korea and China. If that changed, it would be in their interest to develop a bomb. So it has to do with their level of confidence. It has to do with the current security situation. So they have the ability to make one. Getting one would invite aggression. Not having one makes them vulnerable. Now, we had a chance to make a deal that was based on mutual trust and assurances. We blew up that trust. That's why Iran started gradually increasing their stockpile of highly enriched uranium in reaction to cyber attacks, assassinations against their scientists, their generals, attacks against their nuclear plants.
Nick,
and then, wait, last thing, super important. When we bombed Iran, that's their worst nightmare. So that's why now they might be contemplating, oh, well, the breakout time is here. The security situation has changed. We need a nuke. We're imminently in danger of being overthrown. That's really important.
I want to be clear. I've been very good for the last hour and 45 minutes. You guys are doing a great job, by the way. I agree with you, Nick. And the CIA came out months after I said this and said attacking them may accelerate them towards finishing their bomb with nuclear hedging. So let me ask Dinesh D'Souza that, and we got to go to these questions and comments. I'm making you guys stay. We have to do it. Bunch of callers, bunch of comments. What about that issue that this accelerates them into that? I think that is common sense, Dinesh.
Yeah, but there is a little bit of unrealism to it. And some of the times, I think what happens is we get caught in this spider web of analytics. This is Iran's motive. They're hedging. They're, as if we're listening to some stock trade. I got a hedge here. It's very simple. If you had a guy that lives down the street whose official doctrine is death to Alex Jones or death to Nick Fuentes, and that guy in his basement is making a bomb that can take out your home, take you out, take out your whole family, you're not going to sit around and go, well, what's the computation going on in their mind? You're going to say that, guess what? If that guy has the intention, which is to say the motive, and he has the ability to deliver this bomb in a catastrophic way, then guess what? If I've got some friend in the neighborhood, let's call it Israel, and they go, listen, we're happy to go do the job for you. We will go clobber that guy. But guess what? There's one part of the room we can't get to. If you will lend us a plane for one night, we will bomb that part of the house, and that'll be the end of that guy. No more debt to America. You'll be able to sleep safely at night, you and your family. Who wouldn't take that deal? Who would sit around going, well, we have a relationship based on mutual trust? they keep saying debt to America, but we don't really believe them because lots of other people say similar things. And so therefore, we're going to do an Obama type deal in which by and large, we kind of look the other way. We don't even have good ways to fully monitor what they're doing. Nick conceded they have the motive to do it, the interest in doing it, and they can do it pretty much whenever they want. And you're saying we should rest at ease when we have people like that with essentially dangerous weapons?
Okay, Dinesh, I want to go to comments and callers now. I just want to ask you guys one more question. People can look at it from Israeli perspective, American perspective, Iranian perspective, but we've seen this whole chain, and we've seen Wesley Clark, 15, 20 years ago saying he was in the Pentagon meeting, 7 countries of regime change. And we saw all of that. That's why Americans are against this. It's not because we support the mullahs. It's because, we see this larger issue. And that's my personal view. I don't like the mullahs, but at the same time, I don't want to be lied into a quagmire much worse than Vietnam. 93 million people, potentially hidden nuclear weapons. And Russia and China have said no more dominoes are going to fall. This is part of a proxy war in World War III that's really already begun between the West and China and Russia. We all know that. So both of you, just 1 minute on where the world is. Has World War III already begun? And do you guys agree with me that this is a proxy war or a hybrid war battleground between what's left of the West and the emerging new multipolar world?
I would just sum it up in a single sentence or two, and that is basically, I trust Trump in the same way that I trusted Reagan. I think Trump himself, just like the rest of us, was there for Iraq. He learned the lessons of Iraq the same as the rest of us. The difference is, this is a guy who knows how to operate on the global chessboard. He's already proven it in his first term. He didn't drag us into any wars. He has been a no-war president. And I think he's a no-war president now. I think he's trying to settle the issue in the Middle East the same way as he's trying to settle the issue in Ukraine. This is not the same between the two parties. Kamala Harris would never have ordered this strike on Iran. Why? Because she has too many jihadis in her own party. This is the party of Ilhan Omar. It's the party, and I'm afraid it's a party.
That is the first time I'm going to agree with Dinesh that the Democrat Party is the party of that. That is true.
This is why I suggested that Nick might be a Democrat, because a lot of the things that he said tonight are pretty much an echo of Ilhan Omar. We can trust Iran.
This company from Nashville took a page out of the military's playbook and built a portable solar.
Don't have any evil intentions. They're a rational power. They don't have any ill will. Israel's the real problem. Well, I mean, that's Ilhan Omar.
Okay, final comeback, Nick, and we got to take a few questions because everybody's got to go here soon. It's amazing live debate right now. Tuesday, July 1st interview. We are at 8:48 Central here. Appreciate both these guys being with us. Nick, final comeback to that.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrat thing is just so crazy. I just don't even know how to respond to that. I mean, I guess the basis of the debate is I'm trying to talk about the present timeline. I'm talking about the details of Iran's program, cause and effect, the mindset of these countries, how they calibrate, how they calculate their strategies. And then we get these kind of like fables, from the cave paintings of Lascaux, the Barbary pirates, Ronald Reagan. And it's just like, what am I watching here? I feel like we're just in two different universes. And, look, I was sympathetic to a lot of those arguments at one time. I read your books, Dinesh, and I watched your speeches when I was in high school, and I was big into Fox News and all that stuff. But I just feel like it's a completely different reality. And I would say that the big picture, which we can all see, is that the Israelis once again are trying to drive us into another one of their wars with some dimension of U.S. involvement that is really not in our interest. I don't trust Trump at all. Clearly, he has no control over Netanyahu, cannot restrain Israel at all. And the tail is wagging the dog. He pulls his chair out for him. And Trump said repeatedly, we want to make a deal. We want to make a deal. And Israel said, no, we accept no deal. We don't care about the terms. If it's good, if it's bad, we're bombing Iran anyway. And the second the time ran out on Trump's deadline, they were scheduling a 6th round of talks for that Friday and then that Sunday. Israel let loose and they bombed Iran and they started this war, one they knew they couldn't win. They started getting pummeled and they knew that would force the United States to intervene in a way that wasn't effective. And look, now we're in it. Now we're trapped in this problem. You're going to see it rear its head again in a few months, and there'll be more U.S. involvement. We spent $30 billion on this conflict so far. There's nothing America first about it. I don't trust Iran. I don't like Iran. I don't like our adversaries. I just want America's interest to be put
so
first.
Let me ask
and I
you
don't see how
this very briefly. This is, I swear to God, the last question. And we're going to have these callers and a few quick questions. If Trump is trying to stop war, and we hope that's the case, and then Israel wants to go forward, then is there any way out of a larger conflict? You're saying it's going to continue on. Then why is Trump saying today at Alligator Alcatraz that he's got a deal Monday? Have either one of you heard what that is? Dinesh, how you got a lot of contacts with the Republican Party?
Well, no, I mean, all that I know is what's in the public record, that Trump is trying to get Israel not simply to conclude the war in Iran, but also to declare a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, Israel said right after October 7th, we are not doing this until we get the hostages back and until we have defeated Hamas. So there is unanimity in Israel. By that I mean the Likud, the Labour Party, across the spectrum. The Israelis believe you attacked us. We have a job to do. But Trump is telling them, no, I'm going to stop you along the way. So right away, I think here you see who's calling the shots. It's not Netanyahu, it's Trump. In fact, the very idea that a small country like Israel, which is, like I say, 10 or 12 million people, we are 350 million, we're bigger, we're stronger, we're richer. If somehow the Jews control us, then truly they are the master race.
All right. Nick, you got to respond to that. And then I keep saying last question, but, pulling back from all of this, I literally wanted to just have a pro-Israel question, a pro-U.S. question, pro-Iran, whatever. I literally cannot find on the X account at Real Alex Jones a even pro-war view, because I want to show both sides. And it's the same thing. All the callers that I can see are anti-Israel. So that's a larger question. The polls show it. The whole world's turning against Israel. The Democrats are turning against Israel, who I can't stand, by the way. And they love Islam, which is even crazier. I got to be mad at Israel, but also not support radical Islam takeover or Orthodox Islam takeover. So I think it's fair to say, maybe you both disagree with me, or maybe Dinesh D'Souza does. There is definitely a hyper accelerated anti-Israel movement. And does Israel realize that? Even Michael Savage was on my show Friday, and he said, look, I'm pro-Israel, but I want Netanyahu to go because he's turning the world against Israel. And now they expel the few Gazans that are left alive, and the image of them being marched off in the desert, to Libya or wherever. I mean, here's a simple question. Do you agree, Dinesh D'Souza and then Nick, that Israel is at its most unpopular point since it was formed in 1947?
I would say, to me, it's it doesn't even matter. Why? Because I'm not Israel first. I mean, I'm America first. And so Israel's popularity or unpopularity is not at the forefront of my concern. Now, I will say that my experience is that in the Republican Party, and I'm talking about the mainstream of the Republican Party, Israel is very popular. Israel is not, in fact, it's not that the Republican Party is turned against Israel. And this is why
you're right. That's the only place that is popular. I know, I said that.
Well, I mean, it's popular by and large, I think, among the majority of practicing Christians in this country. Why? Maybe part of it is for biblical reasons. Maybe it's partly because we have a Judeo-Christian heritage. We have a Western civilization based on Athens and Jerusalem. And Athens, of course, refers to classical reason. But what is Jerusalem if not the land and the promises of the Bible? So for a lot of Christians, that is important. So yes, I agree the Democrats don't like Israel. I agree that there are powerful forces around the world that don't like Israel. But look, one reason for this is because the Muslims outnumber the Jews like 100 to 1. What are there, like 2.5 billion Muslims and 13 or 14 or maybe 20 million Jews in the world? So is it any surprise that this larger force of Muslims has far more influence worldwide with the UN, with a lot of other countries, Asian countries, and so on? They just outnumber the Jews. And so that's one of the reasons why Israel is so, quote, unpopular.
Nick, comment to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Israel's unpopular because they killed 100,000 people in Gaza. They destroyed 90% of the buildings, 90% of the roads, the hospitals. They kill people that are trying to get aid supplies. They kill innocent civilians. They rape prisoners. And then when the soldiers that raped the prisoners, this happened last year, get arrested, all the government ministers defend the soldiers and a riot forms outside the prison to defend them. I think that's why people hate Israel right now. And I would say as far as Christians are concerned.
Yes, good point, Jonathan. I feel like Tucker Carlson really exposed Ted Cruz last week. And this comes from a guy who was a huge fan of Ted Cruz, but he really exposed himself for being Israel first and not America first. And again, I think any country should be able to defend themselves, but you are in America, elected as a politician of America, so you should be America first, not another country first, America first. And I think Ted Cruz fully exposed himself in that interview.
Why? Why do we like Israel?
Sounds just like
you have government ministers in Israel that say spitting on Christians is an ancient Jewish tradition, and it's fine. You have Zionist rabbis like the Kooks who say that Christians should be killed. They say atheism is preferable to Christianity because Christianity is idolatry. Maimonides, who your buddy Josh Hammer, who, by the way, called all Europeans inherently anti-Semitic in our DNA. He said that Maimonides is the Rambam. He's our Thomas Aquinas. Maimonides said to pray for the death of Christians every single day. I don't know why Christians love Israel. I don't know why people think that they're our friend. I regard Jews and Muslims as basically the same, insofar as neither of them are friends of Christians, neither of them are friends of the West. I think they both have their own motives. They both have terrorist groups. They both oppose Christianity and see us as idolaters. That's the Muslim beef with Christians. That's the Jewish beef with Christians, our worship of the person of Jesus Christ. And so I think that, Israel's become very unpopular. Contrary to what, you and your family say, Dinesh, you say, well, anti-Semitism is because we hate God's promise to Israel. No, we don't like the fruits from the poisonous tree. We don't like what Israel has wrought in the Middle East and the world in the past couple of years, in the past 70 years. And it's just, it's not even a question they influence us. The AIPAC money, the Adelsons, Chabad Lubavitch, all over the White House, brought in by the son-in-law, Jared Kushner. In the first term, Jared Kushner was put in charge of negotiations of the border, over the Abraham Accords, over so many things. He's a donor to the Lubavitchers, and they ran that White House. They were all over the place.
Okay, this could go all night. Real fast, and I swear to God, we're going to stop and go to calls. But just real 2-minute response.
Just on this issue of influence. Here's the thing. I think that it's Miriam Adelson gave 100.
We're America's beverage companies, making American
Sorry about
products
all
with
these ads,
American
guys. That
workers
is
in
super
America's
frustrating.
hometown.
$100 million to Trump for the 24 campaign, a great deal of money. However, Trump is worth somewhere between $4 and $8 billion. So what that means is that for Trump, this kind of money is trivial. It's kind of like saying I'm a multi-millionaire and someone's giving me $100, and then along comes Nick Fuentes. Oh, that guy owns you. We gave you $100, Dinesh. And people actually say this. My son-in-law is a congressman in Dallas. People say, well, AIPAC gave him $10,000. Well, Brandon Gill spent well over $1 million in his campaign. You think he's going to sort of change his position on Israel because someone gave him 10 grand? I mean, this is madness. So similarly, I think there's a lack of perspective here about AIPAC. You think AIPAC is more influential than the pharmaceutical companies? You think AIPAC is more influential than the French company Airbus, which has powerful lobbyist influences and getting contracts all over the world?
No, this is what we're saying. When it comes to just Israel, you guys get so mad and heated the minute people say that Israel is buying our politicians and policy in America. And it gives it away when you guys react and talk this way, just by that standard alone. And the fact that you let them go into these other countries and bomb them, regardless of who started it, it's been continuing because of them starving kids, killing kids. And anytime, just like what Ted Cruz says in an interview with Tucker Carlson, it's his first priority. They are paid the most by this country, and they the Mossad is the one that ruined Jeffrey Epstein in the huge blackmail operation, and no one's saying anything about it. And I think that's a huge reason the Epstein files haven't been released. Let me know what you guys think.
The world, by the way, not just in America. So there are lots of interests. A lot of our own tech companies are far more loyal to globalist interests than they are to the United States. They may be headquartered in Silicon Valley, but they don't care about America. They care less about America probably than Israel does. So the point is, we can't be naive about all this, and we've got to realize that Trump is big enough. He's enough of a mammoth figure that for these relatively trivial sums by a billionaire standards, he can't be bought.
Okay. You both been very gracious. Let's do a few calls and a few comments off X. But I'm telling you, it's all anti-Israel. Should we allow AIPAC to continue to intervene in American politics? Here, overhead shot. And then we have a few weeks ago with Tucker Carlson, we have Senator Cruz saying, oh, no, they don't have any authority. That's what makes people freak out. Just admit it's a powerful lobby. Don't sit there and say, no, they don't really lobby. Dinesh, you want to respond to that?
Wait, can I take that?
Sure, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I think that, of course, AIPAC should be registered under FARA. And no, they should not be able to influence our politics. The way that AIPAC came about is they sprung from the American Zionist Committee, which was a foreign entity. It was foreign money pouring into the United States. JFK said you got to register under FARA because it's foreign money lobbying for a foreign country. And all they did was basically a trick to reorganize how that money is spent. They changed how the money is spent and said, well, we'll take AIPAC and we'll make that a U.S.-based chapter, and then they can spend the money in the United States. So it is a foreign lobby. And this is basically whataboutism, to say, well, what about this lobby? What about that lobby? What about, they're not the only one. They are a foreign lobby. And even though they give small sums to some congressmen, they spend big sums to primary congressmen that oppose them. They did this to a number of progressive Democrats last year. They spent millions behind primary candidates against Democrats that didn't vote for foreign aid to Israel. So their influence is felt everywhere. And it's always this little obfuscation game that's played with them. If you're America first, you can't be in favor of foreign lobbying.
All right, let's move to the next. Let's move to the next.
Well, let's push it some more, because the one name that you gave us was Miriam Adelson. Now, Miriam Adelson is married to Sheldon Adelson, and Sheldon Adelson made about $20 billion because he's a casino mogul in Las Vegas. He owns the Venetian Hotel, for example. So here's a guy who's an American citizen. He's a Jew, but we're not talking about the Israeli government. So are you saying that you want a law that says that Sheldon Adelson, an American citizen, can't spend money on lobbying? And how would you tell us what this law would? Are you going to single out AIPAC, or are you going to say that basically no foreign interest can lobby in the United States? Which, by the way, I'm in favor of. I'm not against it. I'm simply against what it appears to me to be a kind of conflation between the foreign interests of a foreign state, Israel, and American Jews, who are no different than Irishmen, who, by the way, are very involved in Ireland's politics. You have all kinds of societies, German societies, English societies that promote friendly relations with England. As I mentioned, there are corporate interests abroad. There's a Swiss billionaire, Hans Wies Jordan, I think is the guy's name is. He plows tons of money into the Democrats. George Soros is a massive influence, a lot of money that's made abroad, now being deployed within American politics.
George Soros should be locked away in a jail cell. I am 100% against him getting anywhere involved in politics and paying off politicians for specific policy.
So yeah, if you want to have some restrictions on foreign money, I say more power to it. But weirdly, you seem to be wanting to restrict the one money that's actually coming to benefit MAGA against these left-wing Democrats, as you say, and you've not said one word about foreign money that's going to these left-wing Democrats in the first place.
I am against all foreign lobbying. I am against all foreign money. And the problem with this is you talk about Sheldon Adelson, you say, well, he's an American citizen. So what would you do about him? Well, let me ask you about Sheldon Adelson. Yes, American citizen, born and raised in Northeast. Sheldon Adelson, when he died, his body was flown to Israel, where he was buried, and the body was greeted on the tarmac by Benjamin Netanyahu. Sheldon Adelson said he wished he served in the IDF and not the U.S. military. He said, my heart is in Israel. He lobbied the Trump administration to pardon Jonathan Pollard, who was an Israeli spy, stealing our secrets and giving them to Israel. This was something he lobbied for 10 years. Like, this guy clearly was a foreign agent. Do you see any sort of problem with that? I mean, don't you think that his citizenship is sort of a technicality, or do you take any issue at all with his clear foreign allegiance to the state of Israel?
Look, all I'm saying is that there are numerous examples of Americans, homegrown, who have, for some reason or another, fallen in love with some foreign country. I mean, I'll give some examples. There were countless Americans who went to the Soviet Union. What about Adelson?
Do you have a problem with that?
Yes, of course I do. Of course I do. Okay. But I'm just saying that there's nothing uniquely Israeli about it. Think of all the Sandinistas. Think of all the Americans who went down there. Think of the number of Americans who went and fought in the Spanish Civil War. They were obviously putting other countries first. There were many Americans. Look at the Rosenbergs. They spied against the United States for the Soviet Union. Klaus Fuchs. So what I'm getting at is there's an American tradition of Americans who, for whatever reason, sometimes ethnicity, sometimes ideology, they start putting another country first. Are you asking me if that's wrong? Yes, it is. And I think when they break the law, they should be punished, as the Rosenbergs, of course, were put to death. Klaus Fuchs was arrested. So we have laws and we should enforce them. A lot of times, a lot of this bad stuff goes on because people in this country, our own people, allow it to happen. How did we get 10 million illegals? Because the Biden-Harris people went to the border basically and said, wink, 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 come on over. So
Well,
do
they
I
didn't say
like
wink,
the
wink, wink.
illegals? No.
Biden said, when
But
I
we
win,
did let him in.
when Biden said I win, immediately search the border. So I think that's not open for debate. You guys are gracious. Let's hit a few phone calls and we'll end this debate. This is amazing. Thank you to Dinesh D'Souza. Thank you, Nick Fuentes. We've got loaded phone lines, hundreds of questions. Let's just get to a few of these.
All right, guys, I'm going to end it here. I'm going to do a part 2 tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed that debate. Crazy chat. I do think that Nick Fuentes demolished D'Souza, and I think D'Souza kind of responded with feelings more than policy. And yeah, I'm going to go from there, and then we'll continue part 2 tomorrow. Jonathan, Ruth, and everyone that partaked in this video reaction, hope you guys have a blessed day. I will see you guys later. Also, I'm going to be doing a stream later, so I hope you guys join that as well. Peace.